Hogstye.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hogstye. We are in off-season form and kind of that dead, a month or so of the year after the regular season of the NFL, before they really get into the new fun season, free agency, and all the action that happens. So we are going to press on as a show, though, because we always have some plans for this part of the year. If you go on our website, I'm sure you saw, we have a bunch of draft previews and free agency previews that we've been writing. Jamal did one, I did one this week, and we're going to talk about those. But first, guys, I want to talk to you guys about former coach here, Jay Gruden. I loved me some Jay Gruden. Our old co-host Robbie did a great Jay Gruden impression. So we're going to talk some Jay Gruden because he's apparently been making the rounds. He talked with Grant and Danny a few weeks ago, talked with Ben Standig, Kevin Sheehan, as you guys mentioned before when we were prepping for the show. So let's talk about some of the stuff Jay Gruden mentioned
his
in
segment
his
is
rounds
called
now.
the Bitter Former Coach segment, by the way.
Well, I think it's also called the He Got All His Money So He Can Talk Now segment.
Both.
Yeah, because Steve, these contracts, when he had a year left on that deal, so he was probably getting $5 million, and you're going to keep your mouth shut for $5 million.
Well, and you're just not going to bash your boss,
Yeah, and I don't remember if it was $5 million, but he had 1 year left. So
I know one thing: if there was something Jay was always good at, it was his public relations. He was pretty open about his. He was just open in general with his thoughts regarding the team. And he would definitely converse with the media and give them the information, enough information for them to do their jobs. It's not like tight-lipped when it comes to Jay Gruden speaking. And the one I only heard one, and it was the Kevin Sheehan one, and I just want to distinguish that because there's I may have even missed more things that he said in the Standig and the Dan Granny show. So I think what he gave us is just a lot of the same stuff, but also confirm some things like it's out of the horse's mouth. I guess that's the phrase. But that's really what I paid attention to was just confirming some things with the a lot. Griffin, Kirk, not wanting to be here, the whole shebang with Dan and Bruce. Controlling the 2019 draft, et cetera, but I'll let you guys take it away from here before I go further. But there was plenty of things that we should have noticed or paid attention to that was like, okay, so we know this is that. And then like I said, I'll go further, but I'll hear you guys' thoughts first too.
No, I think it's fair to say this is kind of a free-flowing discussion because some of these interviews go back a few weeks, and I'll be honest, the first one I heard was when he was on Grant and Danny, and basically everything he said there, and that was a shorter one, I think that was like a 10-minute thing, he also said to the other guys. So I think there's some repeating of stories by him, especially the one that everyone seems to be talking about, the Kirk Cousins taking a knee game to end, and that was probably one of the bigger moments of, that whole era. One of those bigger brain fart things that you've seen in the NFL. But him coming out and saying, well, it was really on Jackson and Garcon.
I think it really speaks to the class that Kirk Cousins had about it, because Cousins could have said that. And he still hasn't ever said it. He just took it himself and basically said, I don't know what I was thinking, if I recall. But it really, I thought, reflected very poorly on Pierre Garçon. If you watch the play, on the repeat, which I did this morning, I believe Jay, because Garcon really just stood there and did nothing, and I think it really reflects poorly on Garcon as a player and as a person to just refuse to run a pattern, because the story was that Pierre Garcon hated fade patterns. Essentially, he only wanted it thrown exactly like Peyton Manning did them, and he basically refused to run the pattern. That's what Jay said. And Jay said both him and Deshaun refused, but it was supposed to be Pierre. The ball is going to go to Pierre, and on the play, he was really just standing there. That's just classless. Reflects poorly on you. I mean, you're making millions of dollars. Run the damn pattern. Shut up and run the pattern.
I mean, I agree with you that it doesn't look good for Garcon. And, Gruden also said in at least, I think it was the Sheehan one, that he said, he really loved Garcon as a player, and same with Deshaun Jackson. Like, he would take them on his team any day, even now. Like, he loved working with them. That was just one thing that they hated doing.
Who cares if you hate it? Do it anyway. So what?
Yeah, right. I will also say they're both too small to run fades.
That's beyond the point. I mean,
I was gonna say, well, technically, Deshaun got his way when it came to run blocking, though, because
that was
very often you would see. Well, before I even go into Deshaun Jackson, I think two things are right. I think that the fade or refusal to run a fade it really does look poorly upon Pierre. But I also think. I also think the decision to kneel at the time in the circumstances and situation of that game also reflects poorly on Kirk. Because, I mean, at a split second, you just throw it out of bounds. Like, if in hindsight, it's easier to say that. So I can't say what he was thinking in the midst when he found out that Pierre was really serious about not running the fade. But in the end, throw the ball out of bounds like that. It could save you some trouble, or spike it, because that's what we all thought you were going to do anyway. We thought you were going to spike it. Instead, he kneeled. So there was other options for Kirk to take.
I think
so
Kirk
both
panicked.
Of them look. That's what I think. I think he panicked too. So I can see him forgetting the right thing to do in that situation. But at the end of the day, both decisions made, and with Garcon situation being brought to light now, we have further context on the situation. So both of them just look bad.
I don't remember if that was a fourth down or not. But if it seems like
No, it ran out.
So and the right thing to do would have been to spike it and kind of regroup and do something else.
Right.
Yeah. So with Deshaun, I was bringing him up because he did seem to get his way. Versus like Pierre, technically he got his way, but it was a negative impact on the team. Essentially, with Deshaun, when you're that you don't like run blocking, and in realistic, even if you liked it at 160, like, you're not blocking no DBs, you're not blocking no linebackers or safeties. So yeah, putting Ryan Grant in is the smartest thing to do, but also it allowed Deshaun to get his way as well. Because what if they really needed him to block on the play?
I don't know why all these receivers have attitude problems. So many receivers are just total divas. I've never really understood why.
It's like in the DNA of being able to run 4-3.
I guess.
Somehow you have an attitude.
There's a lot of other skilled players on the field, but it's the receivers that have the huge, massive diva attitude problems.
Cornerbacks too.
Well, if the cornerbacks, if your name is Deion Sanders, at least.
Yes.
But anyway, but the bigger story to me of the Jay Gruden, and I didn't listen to any of them, I read about them, I didn't listen to any of them. But what I read about at least was that Jay confirmed that it was Dan Snyder that drafted Dwayne Haskins, and he wasn't really flattering in his description that I read, that in his description about what happened. He literally said Jay got off his yacht and drafted him, and even though none of us wanted him, basically.
You should listen, because Jay does a Dan Snyder impression a couple times in at least one of the interviews.
It's not flattering.
It is not. It is not flattering at all.
He also said that he knew that Haskins was going to get drafted 6 months before that night. So you kind of, like, I guess when you're around the guy long enough, you kind of predict his moves. Like, it's just that simple with him, and with him being Dan and Bruce. So I think it's not it's tough, man, because like when I think about the larger issue of it all is what coach. I don't think there would have been any coach in in 2014 when you think about all the coaches around that were available. I don't think there was going to be any coach that was going to be able to survive a work situation like that. Dan and Bruce being so involved and not understanding the magnitude of the decisions that they make, and how it can impact the team and the culture or what they're trying to build, meaning the coaches, regardless of how good or bad you perceive Jay Gruden to be as a coach, I don't think he would have been successful regardless. Like if he was better than what we thought, or if he was actually just bad.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah,
Well,
he definitely. Look. I mean, don't forget that Dan Snyder's mentor is Jerry Jones. What does Jerry Jones do? Meddle worse than any owner out there. And only Jerry does know more about football than Dan ever did, because at least Jerry played in college. Jerry does know something.
Yeah.
But Dan, look, I think other than Dan has been bad at times. The cardinal sin for Bruce Allen was that Bruce thought he knew football and he didn't, and so then you have these two guys who don't know anything, who are dictating the draft over the wishes and recommendations of professional scouts, and that's how you end up with things like drafting a quarterback that nobody wants. And I'll just say this, Jay's at fault too. Jay might not have wanted him, but you got him, and you needed to have a better attitude towards him, because as I've always said, part of what happened to Dwayne was on the Redskins, and anybody who is just blaming just Dwayne Haskins is just wrong. A better situation would have resulted in a better attitude, and it would have given him more of a chance. So the fault lies in both parties.
Yeah. Well, I think, and we talked about it at the time, the methodology for building a proper team is pick a coach, or really pick a GM. GM picks your coach. Coach picks your quarterback. And you do that early on. You don't do that in year 5. Because if you do it in year 5, the coach is dead.
I think it's safe to say that Washington has not done that since the late 80s. Since Mark Rippon was
they haven't.
Here. I think...
Right. Joe Gibbs, a rare case of a guy who picked multiple quarterbacks over the years.
Yeah, I guess he picked Mark Brunell. I'll give him that in Joe Gibbs, too. But other than that, Washington has never done the quarterback thing right in decades.
No, they really haven't. And in Jay's interviews, he was pretty critical, I think openly critical of that lack of power that he had when it came to the roster. It's the whole roster. Because, when he was talking about the Garcon thing and the Deshaun Jackson, he's like, I wanted to keep them. He wanted to keep Preston Smith. I think he wanted to keep Crowder. I don't think he mentioned it in any of these, but I think those were his guys, and no one cared.
I still don't understand why the team let Jamison Crowder in particular go. That never made any sense to me.
Yeah. None of those moves made Bruce. You know why it made sense? Bruce Allen was in love with comp picks. He loved the idea of, if I let an average guy go, I can get another pick. So, he was in love with that, and it made no sense.
I don't understand it. And look, Jay did a lot wrong. This is just Jay talking from Jay's perspective, and you're always gonna sort of minimize your own faults. I think that's just human nature. So,
right.
I understand it. But I appreciate the fact that Jay was open and honest. Jay's never having a reunion with Dan Snyder now, I'll tell you that much. Nor would he want it.
I mean, how many people really want to come back here after a couple
Nobody.
years? Yeah. I mean, the old timers do. That's about it. Doug and, guys who are here for the glory days, I guess.
Yeah, but in terms of, I mean... things always end badly in Washington. It never ends well for GMs, for players, for everybody. In a different situation with different management, less ego involved, it's possible that Kirk Cousins might have stayed. Now, I never would have paid him a 100% guaranteed contract, and if that was what he was set on, he can go piss off. As far as I'm concerned, I never would have done that. But I think, given a different personalities involved, I think there at least would have been a better shot that Kirk would have stayed, for better or for worse, because he's not done anything in Minnesota really either.
No, but it would have. I've always said this. He at least would have given you more stability, I think. for the whole team. And stability is everything. So, the whole, if you haven't listened to any of the interviews, you should at least pick a couple of them up. Even if you're not a Jay Gruden fan, and you guys know I've always been a Jay Gruden fan, for a lot of reasons. But, if you are not a Jay Gruden fan, it's probably worth listening to just so you have some, perspective from one guy on what was going on those 6 years or whatever it was. Because there's stuff about Bill Callahan in there, how apparently I didn't know that he wasn't a Jay Gruden hire. Jay was told, this is your line coach,
Just
like
exemplifies
that.
what's been wrong in this franchise.
Yep. There was a lot of little tidbits that if you go and it almost would be like worth listening twice if you're like us and you want to obsess about every
Don't
little
forget,
detail.
this is the ownership team that hired Jim Zorn to be an offensive coordinator before they had a head coach, and then shockingly enough couldn't find a head coach.
Well, no, technically that was Vinny Serrato.
It was still Dan Snyder,
not Bruce. Yeah, it was Dan, but it was Dan and Vinny, not Dan.
Look, Dan is responsible. Dan's the owner. He's in charge.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, anyway, we could move on from that unless you guys had any other thoughts about some of the stuff that was mentioned there.
No, I mean, no.
No. I mean, one other thing that Jay did talk a lot about was the quarterbacks. Obviously, he talks about Kirk and Alex Smith being conservative. And he was like, well, you're never going to get to like 300 yards high-powered offense with Alex Smith. That was one of those little nuggets. And we still have a quarterback problem. So, Steve, you had mentioned that there were some more quarterback rumors that you were seeing and wanted to chat about.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus
until we have a quarterback, it's going to be quarterback rumors.
I know. Marcus Mariota is the latest one.
Right.
I wouldn't trade a hot nickel for Marcus Mariota, not because he's not a good quarterback, but it's just not a guy that you're going to really get anywhere with, and I would rather not trade for somebody like that. I would sign him as a free agent, but I just wouldn't want to waste resources on a guy who's not going to be a franchise quarterback, and I just don't believe Marcus Mariota is going to be that. That's the bottom line. And apparently Mariota has what's called a poison pill in his contract, which essentially increases his cap hit dramatically if he's traded, and that's put into contracts expressly to discourage trades. It's when the team will not give a no-trade clause, but they agree to a poison pill, which makes him a less valuable trade prospect, basically, and harder to trade. So I just wouldn't. It's not that I wouldn't accept Mariota as a quarterback. It's that I just don't want to trade for a guy like that. What is that going to get us? I'd rather just roll with Heineke and Smith and waste trade picks on Mariota. That's my view.
I think I understand where you're coming from, so I don't disagree entirely in terms of which way to acquire Mariota, but I just wouldn't be mad if you can get him for anything lower than a third. Like if you can give away a couple fourth and later picks, and maybe something next year, like a conditional pick next year, okay. But I'm not a person who's sold on Mariota. The guy, a lot of people just don't understand, because I had conversations about Mariota. When you're trading for a quarterback, I think the trade has to be for someone, and let me finish my point, but it has to be for someone that has potential or is a bona fide, like he's already solidified in that top 10.
Sure.
There's about 4 years, 5 years, whatever. I think it's 2016 for him, or 2015. Sorry, 5 years worth of tape that suggests, yes, he's a competent quarterback, but he's not one who can win games with his arm. And he can't elevate in terms of being a good distributor while also taking those chances down the field that makes your passing game a threat to any defense. He'll have his moments where he's accurate, but he won't consistently test the middle to deep. And Like when you trade for a quarterback like that, you have to see the potential in them to get that done. Because eventually, when you get into those bigger games and you go against better quarterbacks, the run game won't be able to save you all the time. You're going to need that quarterback to throw. You're going to need that quarterback to extend. Yeah. He can extend, but that's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL nowadays. And I'm not sold on Mariota based on what I've seen in the past. And even one game that he played this year does not alter the fact that there's still 4 or 5 years that's out there on Mariota. And it's a reason why he got benched last year. Because Ryan Tannehill was just too good. He came in with the same situation, a good running game, the same weapons Mariota had, and he looked way more effective than Mariota has been in his entire time in Tennessee.
Well, I guess that's my point exactly. It's not that I hate Marcus Mariota as a quarterback. It's that I don't think he's a top-tier quarterback. I wouldn't trade assets for him. I would maybe sign him as a bridge quarterback, if you need one. But I wouldn't be offended if he was, on the Washington football team. But I wouldn't trade for him. And just from taking a wag at his trade, so Carson Wentz, who I think, in my view, is a much better quarterback than Mariota, went to the Colts.
Bigger peak.
Yeah, went to the Colts for a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional 2022 second-round pick. Conditional meaning under certain conditions it could become a first-round pick. So Mariota's
they get a second. No matter
so
what.
Mariota is less
pick,
than that. So it's not. Yeah, I mean, if it's a fourth-round pick or whatever, sure, but I just wouldn't do it. I don't think you're getting more than you would get with some combination of Smith, Heineke, and or Allen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where he would fit in that ranking necessarily. I think he's probably above all three of them, maybe just health-wise for a couple of them.
Well, health-wise, sure. I mean, but he's healthy, so that automatically.
Exactly. But like you said, he'd be a bridge. He's not the answer. I think fans need to be realistic. I know folks put stuff out. Oh, Russell Wilson wants to be traded. Oh, not Alex Smith. Aaron Rodgers. These aren't happening.
No.
Like, we need to move on and realize this is a bridge quarterback year. It probably would be best just to say tank it at quarterback for a year, and then you can clear some cap space. But
it's a bridge to either Mac Jones or Trey Lance, as you watch me beat my head against the concrete over those two.
I would rather. I mean, I would not want Mac Jones.
I don't want either one of them. Trey Lance has got a ton of flaws. He's a Walmart Cam Newton.
Yeah, he's got a lot more, but I see more ceiling with him than Mac Jones.
I wouldn't spend a first-round pick on either one of those guys.
I don't think that's unfair. I just, between the two, I'll go with Lance over Jones is my point.
Maybe, but I mean, I'm leery of any Alabama quarterback because the pieces around them, the offensive line and the running game and the defense are just so much better than everybody else.
Hey, you know what's funny?
What's that?
Not that I'm not putting you in this box at all. It's just reminded me of this argument. I've never once heard this comparison, but it's like, for all the flack that, or all the pushback that people get online when they state their opinion that they're weary or they are hesitant to take a chance on Ohio State quarterbacks, nobody ever noticed that people have done that consistently with all the Alabama quarterbacks that come out because of the reasons that you listed, but never thought, okay, well, Justin Fields he's in this same boat with Ohio State, and every single quarterback before him, like, it's not just Dwayne Haskins. Like, it's been T.J.
Cardell Jones,
J.T. Barrett, Cardell Jones, Terrell Pryor, and
the guy who won the Heisman. Troy Smith? Is that it?
Troy Smith.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Troy Smith. Like, all these quarterbacks prior to Dwayne Haskins has failed in the NFL as quarterbacks. Terrell had some years. I'm not gonna say he had success, but he had some years as a wide receiver when he transitioned. But people do the same thing with Alabama on a consistent basis, and that's more profound than what they do with the recent don't judge the helmet. And so it just dawned on me when you said it, Steve. It's like, nobody makes these comparisons. They're so quick to push back on Mac Jones because of all the talent around him, but they don't say, okay, they don't think about the situation with what's his name coming out. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make a controversial
statement? Go ahead.
Now, one of you two guys, tell me the common denominator between all of the Alabama quarterbacks and all of the Ohio State quarterbacks that Jamal just mentioned. What's the common denominator?
The superstar head coaches.
All of the Alabama quarterbacks have been white, and all of the Ohio State quarterbacks have been black. Now, who's getting?
Well, Tua's Samoan.
Okay, of color.
So,
who gets the benefit of the doubt on all these things? It's always the Alabama guys, the guys who look like the traditional.
That's true.
I'm not trying to be Mr. Woke here. I'm the opposite of that, as everybody knows me. But it's the I think the Alabama guys look like the traditional fell out of the quarterback factory quarterbacks who, let's face it, are white. Right. And the Ohio State guys, I think, don't get the benefit of the doubt because black quarterbacks historically have not gotten the benefit of the doubt in the NFL from coaches, from scouts. Bill Polian on ESPN radio said Lamar Jackson should have been a running back. Said he was small, which he's not. Had no idea who he was, just as an example. So
right.
I think there's sort of an inherent racial bias built into how the NFL community looks at quarterbacks, even now today.
I think there is still that bias. I don't think anyone would doubt that.
I mean, who's the best one that's come out in a while out of Alabama? From 3 or 4 years ago. The name's escaping me.
McCarron?
Yeah, thank you. A.J. McCarron was supposed to be the next best thing.
Okay.
I like McCarron, too. I ain't going to lie to you.
Yeah, but he's not. Is he a franchise quarterback? No. Was he treated like God's gift to quarterbacking when he came out? Yes. Or I think people ignore his flaws, and I ignored his flaws at the time and ignored what we're talking about. And part of it is that he just looks the part. Whereas you have a guy,
sure,
some of the guys that come out of Ohio State don't look the part, and so they get picked apart, justifiably so, whereas the Alabama guys don't.
Where they should get just as picked apart, sure.
That's as woke as you're ever going to get me, people.
Yes, because Steve is firmly asleep most of the time. So.
I'm just right, not
agree.
asleep.
There's always been, those. What's the word? Implicit bias.
Implicit bias. Yes.
That's not. Yeah.
Am I using that phrase correctly
here?
Okay, so I think that's always been around when it comes to, especially the quarterback position.
Sure.
That's always been there. And some people clearly aren't aware of it based on when you ask them why they say it, or why they prefer it, or their opinion is the way it is. They may not even notice how they say it. And so we don't have to go too further. Like, obviously, it's been said, and I don't have a problem with you sharing your opinion. And I feel like for those who are listening, like, it's always been around. And I think that one of the things that you just have to look into, if you're one or you may fit the description, is think a little bit harder about why you may say the things that you say.
Well, I won't name any names, but there are people I see when we talk about, like, Dwayne Haskins. There are certain people who I've seen routinely say, "Oh, Dwayne was lazy," or "Dwayne wasn't smart enough to understand the game."
In our comment section.
I've seen them in our comment section. I've seen them on Twitter. I'm not naming names on people, but you see that a lot. And every time, even guys like Jay Gruden, who I think by all accounts was not a Dwayne Haskins fan, has always said he's a super intelligent quarterback. Just didn't have he wasn't working hard enough. Like it. So I think there are those biases that people always put on people, and it might be because of race. It probably is because of race. I can't tell you 100%. I've always
gone back to Cordell Stewart, and that's before Jamal's time, certainly. But
I remember my boy.
Yeah,
in college though.
I mean, there was no doubt that Cordell Stewart was a quality quarterback, but he consistently got told in the media, by football analysts, everybody, he was a wide receiver. He's a runner. He's a receiver. And he fought that his entire career. When it's the reason, and again, you're talking about a political conservative here saying this, the reason was he was black. And back then, black players were not supposed to be quarterbacks. and so Cordell Stewart's been fighting that battle a whole bunch.
And you're not talking a long time ago. That's the 90s.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's 25 years ago, and
right. Yeah, no, I understand that.
Has it gotten better? Yes, but I think that there's just an implicit thing about it's still in NFL circles about quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I would also point out, even though there probably is that bias with certain scouts, at the same time, I would argue at least 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks next year, certainly probably this year too, have been African American at this point.
Well, I mean, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton,
Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it's getting better, but I guess my point is I think there's still some of that implicit.
Oh,
I
agree.
Prove themselves, and they did, but they didn't get the benefit of the doubt, especially Jackson.
No, Jackson definitely didn't. I mean, Patrick Mahomes right now, it's fair to say he probably should have been the number 1 drafted quarterback of his class. And,
I don't put that much on race. I mean, it's sometimes the NFL teams are terrible about scouting quarterbacks. They always have been.
Yes, there's
most
that
of them
too.
fail. I mean, almost every quarterback. I remember when I did my big draft analysis. It took me weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
The quarterbacks have the lowest success rate of almost any position.
Yeah, I think it was quarterbacks and wide receivers are always
the
hardest. Yeah. Well, that's always going to be a thing, and when it comes to drafting, the one thing that we don't know with any of these guys, Lawrence, Mac Jones, whoever, we don't know what their mental makeup is, and I think so much of the quarterback game is cerebral. It's like pitching in baseball. If you don't have the right mindset, you'll never be successful.
I think in this draft, and I haven't studied them enough yet. I'm working on it, but Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson are the 2 guys you want. I'm not sold on Trey Lance. I'm not sold on Mac Jones. I think
not sold on Fields.
No, I haven't watched enough of him to conclude for sure. But I think he suffers from kind of some of the same problems that Dwayne Haskins did in terms of being at Ohio State. Just lends itself to you have more time, you have more open receivers. Whether or not he can overcome that in the NFL, I don't know. But I'm not sold at all on Jones and Trey Lance, that's for sure. Sure. I just think it's maybe a bad year to draft quarterbacks if you're in the middle of the first round.
If you're not going to get one of those 2 guys, I agree. Overall, those 2 guys I think are locks to be decent.
And they're also going to be in the top 5. I mean, maybe 1, 2.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance that they go 1, 2.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But that being said, I haven't watched Fields enough yet to conclude for sure. But that's just my initial thought.
I personally would be willing to. I would be okay with 3 things. I would be okay with trading if we're in a decent position that is affordable for Washington. I can't say what that is because it's all subjective. Like when the day comes, but if they're in position to trade up for Lance or Fields, I'll be okay with it. I personally speaking, when it comes my opinion on Fields, like I wouldn't touch him. I don't wish him any failures or anything like that on his career, but I personally have that hesitancy about Ohio State quarterbacks based on what systems they run in college and then how they come out looking in the NFL. Like you see that the system was so dependent on what works well in college. And with that being said, I would welcome him taking a chance anywhere in the NFL so I can personally root for him and not have any hesitancy if it doesn't work out on our team, then damn, we wasted XYZ years on him. I would just be like, all right, I wish you all the best. Have no doubt in my mind or anything like that.
Right.
But if the coaches believe in him and they decide to trade up for him, then okay, we gotta make it work. In my mind. So if they decide to trade up for him and they like him based on what he can do in their system, okay, that's coach's opinion. I can't. If it's done, it's done. And then I also would have no problem taking Trey Lance if they wanted to trade it for him. The people on the 2nd or 3rd round, I won't have a problem if they decided to take Mac Jones or Kyle Trask if they took them outside of the first round.
Well, sure. I'm talking about first round.
Yeah, I think we're strictly talking first rounders here. I think Jones, Trask, like you said, perfect second round. Because then you can bench him for a year, let him grow, and there's no pressure.
Now, my problem with Lance, and I have watched as much Lance film as you can. There's not a ton out there, on YouTube and stuff.
No, he only played one year.
Yeah, that, and he's playing up in North Dakota State. I mean, it's hard to watch. But
there's four
I've
people
watched
in the
Trey Lance, and here's my problem with Lance. He's no doubt he's very athletic. He can make plays with his feet. I'm all for that.
Right.
Passing, his technique is bad. He throws these rainbow passes downfield. He doesn't have a great strong arm. He's not that accurate. His receivers are open. I think he would have a very hard time in the NFL developing into a pocket passer, and throw in the lack of experience and throw in the level he came from. I think he has a very tough road to hoe in the NFL. That's not to say I wouldn't take him on my team. But what I wouldn't do is spend a first-round pick or trade up for him. I think he's a very developmental prospect. He reminds me a lot of Cam Newton. He's not as big as Newton, but he reminds me of Cam Newton in the way he runs, in his fearlessness, in the way he attacks defenses on the ground. But his arm, his accuracy, and his technique scare me to death. That's my opinion of Trey Lance.
And I think those are all concerns, and the fact that he's playing at a lower level than all these other guys, even lower than Zach Wilson, who's in a mid-major school. That is a concern too. Like, some people say you shouldn't count that, but I think you gotta at least factor that in. Guys, we should move on and talk about some of this other stuff that we had on the agenda. So, like I said at the beginning, Jamal did a preview of secondary free agents. And I think it's fair to say Washington probably will need to make one or two upgrades to their secondary this year. Keep that defense looking good. They had some busted coverages, nothing too bad last year, but one or two upgrades might be warranted, right?
Yeah.
So, Jamal, why don't you take us through? I'm particularly curious about the safeties. I almost want you to start with the safeties, but I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah. So let's circle back to that they gave up
safeties?
a couple. They gave up a couple big plays.
Yeah.
So I do want to remind you, at one point in this year, and this was not just early on in the year. This was probably like mid-season too. The Washington football team.
It's all right. Yeah.
They led the league in big plays, explosive plays allowed.
Right.
They held that title for multiple weeks at a time. I don't know what it ended up being at the end of the season, but they led it by a good amount. So that just goes to show in general, and it actually circled back at the end of the year, in the Carolina game for sure, and then the Tampa Bay game. It was a lot of explosive plays in those alone. I mean, you gave up 500 yards against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My point. You have Kendall Fuller, who's under contract, but Ron Darby, who is a free agent. And then you also have Fabian Moreau and Danny Johnson, who are also free agents. Fabian and obviously Danny, they're both backups, but Ronald Darby played really good this year. And you have to understand, he has become a priority. He should become a priority for coaches to try and re-sign. But even though I think they have a good shot, I would just say, while making this, I assumed that Kendall Fuller was going to be the only standing cornerback that Washington will have. So when you do that, you have to look at the next other options. And you have I think about 5 that I listed. I will start off. I'll start off with one of the guys whose name's been thrown around quite often. Just on social media, and that's AJ Boye from the Denver Broncos this past year. He's 30 years old, and I think that a lot of people felt that it can be a sneaky good fit because of his previous talent, but also what he can do at the line of scrimmage in terms of his physicality, but also being able to stick to. I'm holding a sneeze, so I'm kind of. This is really
hit the cough button
right now. Yeah. But anyway, I'll keep going until the time comes. So basically, he's known for what he's did with Houston and Jacksonville, but I think when it comes to Boye, you have to consider the external circumstances that he's found himself in. Specifically, he's missed 7 games last year he's only played in 7 games last year in 2020 with the Broncos due to injuries and suspension. And 2 of those suspension games are going to be taking place in the week 1 and week 2 of this year. So he's missing 2 weeks off ribs. That's not a big deal, but when you consider it was performance enhancing, like how bad does it really hurt your stock? And then also in the 7 games that you played, you didn't play that well. So you had injuries and then you had a suspension, and then you have to consider, all right, well, he's 30. Do you really want to take a chance on a guy who is over that 30-year-old hump and then dealt with PEDs and injury issues and wasn't that?
Can I answer that question?
Perform that well and go ahead.
No. Look,
and that's where I was getting at for all the people who were interested in AJ Boye. Like I'm a fan of him personally in the sense of that he does fit in certain situations. If you wanted to get a depth piece and he's their 3rd or 4th string, you can entertain the idea, but odds are he's probably not what Washington is looking for specifically when there's other options out there. And one of my better options, like I said, I only did about 5 for cornerbacks that made sense, but one of my better options is Desmond King, 26 years old, coming from the Tennessee Titans. I don't know what his preference is in terms of, because these you can easily go to AFC to NFC. This may be like a very simple point that I'm making, but sometimes like in my head, these trends aren't necessarily like they're used to teams that they like in their realm of familiarity. Like these type of free agents, they stick to what they know. So it's like me thinking about Desmond, like he would probably stay in the AFC with a team that he's very familiar with in their schemes. That's my opinion. Like when it comes to free agents trying to predict where they'll go, but I think he is like the best fit for Washington. So if they somehow get lucky, and they can bring Desmond King in, you're looking at a guy who is one of the more versatile secondary players in the NFL. He's a playmaker at both. He can play. So should I? Pause?
No, it's fine.
Look.
No. It's not. Yeah. Okay.
I like Awuzie. I think he's a quality player. I think he would be a decent corner on the team. I also like the idea of taking him from Dallas. That makes me happy. Desmond King, quality player. He's versatile. He's had some decent seasons. Yes, his play dropped off. What can you say? Personally, for me, for the cornerback situation, and I know Jamal has more to go, Ron Darby, for me, might be the best and easiest solution to the problem. I thought he played pretty well, especially in the second half of the season. And I think a lot of those, the deep ball things were mix-ups. They were safety problems. Mm-hmm. You're going to get to safeties. We'll save that. But to me, I think maybe Darby might be the best solution.
Well, and, I think Darby's a good, solution. It just depends on the price point, of course. Of course. There's one guy, you haven't really brought him up yet, Jamal, but I wouldn't mind them going after a guy from your list. People can, of course, see it on thehogstie.com. Xavier Rhodes, who I know he's getting up there. 30 is always that magic number of second half of your career. But, a guy like that, I think, gives you quality depth behind Darby and, Fuller. And we also should, we have Jimmy Moreland still under contract, too. So, that would then give you, in my mind, Rhodes gives you some versatility to kick Fuller inside sometimes. I think, the one thing that I've always stressed is you need to have a good slot guy, and that it takes a special talent to do that. And I think that's been an Achilles heel for us in the past. Not so much last year, but in general. it's been an Achilles heel for this team.
Yeah, I'm not actually. I think Moreland's been up and down, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that's frustrating, because I do think there was some issues that he had, struggling to like understand concepts, and I would have to like refresh my mind by going back in time and seeing what I remember. But I do remember it was like some issues with him understanding some concepts that played out on the field. Like there was some mistakes that was like I think he was one of the reasons behind some. And I will have to re-verify before I come to that conclusion. But that's what I remember. With that being said, I think one of the most ideal things that Washington can do is, like Steve said, re-sign Ronald Darby. But I agree with you, Alex, in the fact that Xavier Rhodes would be a really good option, because of the fact that you can kick Kendall Fuller inside the slot and allow him to. That's where he thrives at. And Kendall Fuller has had issues. Now, he specifically is the one I remember having his moments where he was getting toasted. Like he had his little hot streak where he had like 2 or 3 straight games with interception and had 4 total or something like that. But he still had issues on the boundary, struggling to keep up with receivers. And actually got beat pretty bad on quite a few bombs for Washington or against Washington. So with that being said, I'm not saying Fuller is bad, but I'm saying you've seen his struggles on the boundary, because like that's where they wanted him to exclusively play. That's what you're getting paid for. But it doesn't hurt if you can bring in another guy who is just as solid out there and kick Kendall Fuller where he plays best and have him play that full time.
Don't forget that Kendall Fuller got beat out by Bashaud Breeland in Kansas City for a corner slot. And remember that Fuller ended up as a safety when he left Kansas City, and maybe I'm just spitballing here, and we're going to get to safeties in a minute, but maybe Kendall Fuller is a long-term answer at free safety. Just a thought.
He could be. Here's the thing. You mentioned, Jamal, that he got beat. I remember Darby getting beat on a couple big plays, especially early in the year. Like everyone, yeah. The nature of the sport is that they're going to get beat. Yeah. I think the thing that I liked from both those guys we had this year, Darby and Fuller, is when they got beat, they still bounced back. You didn't see them get into these long-term slumps some guys get into.
I think that's
now
fair.
that said,
I think that's fair.
Yeah. That said, you need depth. You need quality depth. You can't necessarily just go cheap after the starting 2 corners anymore like teams used to. I think you need to have 3 good guys now, and then you can, fill in with rookies after that. But the NFL is such a passing league that you can't just have 2 corners and
But
not
it's
worry.
a valid point. Jamal raises a valid point here. I don't think Kendall Fuller is the number 1 corner.
No,
he's the big money guy and and he's likable, and he's a fan favorite. But I don't think he played like a number 1 corner last year. I wouldn't want to trust him against pick your top wide, Antonio Brown or Mike Evans or whatever. I mean, pick your player. I don't think he's that guy. And I think there is a need at corner. I think Ronald Darby is a talented player. I think honestly Darby may be a better pure corner than Fuller, to be honest with you.
He's a better outside.
Yeah, I think so. So they need help. I mean, another name, Jamal, you haven't mentioned yet, Jason Verritt. I don't know. I mean, he's on your list. I mean, hadn't he been hurt, quite a bit? That makes me nervous.
Yeah, he has. But I think the reason why he's on this list is because throughout his entire career, so 2020 was a symbolism, or it encompassed or highlighted, whatever word you want to use, what he was able to do throughout his career when he was healthy. Like, he's had spurts throughout his career in which you saw him play well. And when I mean spurts, it's like literally 2, 3, maybe 1 game a season, because that's all he was playing. But early on in his career, he's had like 2 seasons in which he played at a really high level, and he played enough games for him to be considered this person where it's like you're hoping he gets back on the field healthy. Well, in 2020, that finally happened. And he was able to showcase in 13 games what he has been doing prior to his injuries. He had 4 or 5 years where he was he ended his season on injured reserve, playing only 26 out of a possible 96 throughout his career. But these last 13, it was really good. Pro Football Focus had him only allowing less than 9 yards of reception, a pass rating of 76, and only one touchdown on 803 snaps throughout the season. That is who he is. And for me, Verritt is a proven, solidified cornerback. The question is, what will other people, in terms of the other teams, what would they be willing to pay him because of his injury history? But also, like, how much of a market is he going to have? Because Washington, if they get in the bidding war for a guy like him, with his history, you don't want to overpay for a guy who may end up reverting back to the norm, which is unfortunately, him having an injury. I don't wish that on anybody, but you don't want to overpay, and then turns out that he can't stay healthy still, and that's where the problem lies. But he's a really good option.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Just the injury, considering the enormity of the injury problem this franchise has had for years, anybody who's had a ton of injuries just automatically makes me nervous.
Yeah, and we should flip to safeties here, and one of the guys on your list who I've always kind of liked, but he's got the same problem, was Malik Hooker. Same like great player, always hurt.
Yeah, Hooker. I mean, obviously the upside is him being if he can stay healthy, is being the single high, something that Washington has needed for a while. You always, like, even when we found our good players, they've been strong safeties. You're looking at DJ Swearinger. You're looking at Landon Collins for a split second. Literally a split second, and then he went. He's had his issues, but then when you move on from him, and you find Cam. In the midst of Landon Collins being injured, like, Cam has been a solid, strong safety, and you've never really had that guy who's accountable for the deep end of the defense, or the deep field, and that's where Malik Hooker can come in. For obvious, like, he's somebody who can allow Cam Curl to flourish as a versatile box safety who knows how to play the line of scrimmage, cover, but more importantly, playing the slot as well. So he can cover tight ends or play in the slot, and that allows the defense to become versatile. But, like, my question, or my pause or hesitation on Hooker is literally the injuries.
Sure.
And that's what you get with a guy who's inconsistent, and allows him to be a reasonable option price wise for any team. So he may have a market, but you're not going to pay too much, and all the teams that's going to be bidding against each other, they know that he's not going to be worth a certain number. So I think that's where Malik Hooker comes in if you want to take a chance on a 24-year-old guy trying to revive his career.
Well, it should be said that Malik Hooker's last injury was an Achilles. And being a corner and a speed guy,
safety.
Sorry, no, yes. A safety and a guy who has to rely on speed and agility just naturally for his in the position. It makes me a little bit nervous. Even though he's 24, Achilles can ruin some of that. So I think that will probably and should maybe affect his value a little bit. I mean, Washington's situation, they haven't moved on from Landon Collins. Remember, Landon Collins has a huge cap number. He's strictly an in-the-box safety. Nobody think he's a deep safety because he's just not. At least he's never done it before. Cam Curl is more of an in-the-box safety. So I don't think
he's a little more versatile, though.
Yeah, but I don't think he's a single high safety. And so I think the future probably is Landon Collins leaves, Cam Curl becomes a starter, and then you need this single high safety. And so if it's Hooker, great, injury problem. You've got some other good names on this list, Jamal, that can maybe fill the role too.
Yeah, Anthony Harris and Marcus May. Those are specifically Marcus May, but those are two names that I'd be all for. I have the hesitation on Malik Hooker, and I think Justin Simmons is just going to be a little bit expensive. And I don't think that Washington will commit a lot of money to Justin Simmons, 27 years old out of Denver.
He's going to get a big
obviously,
contract.
I'm about to say, obviously a lot of fans remember him because he was the talk last year, and I think Denver ended up franchising him. So I don't think they're going to do. I mean, for obvious reasons, they're not going to do it twice. Not for a safety. So he's going to have his time in free agency, and he's going to have a big market. And truthfully, I don't want to say that to say. I mean, to state that Marcus May and Anthony Harris won't have a big market too, because they are. They're one of they're good names and good players too. So they'll have markets. But I think the reason why May, for me, is number one, and Anthony Harris too, is just what he's able to do during his time in New York. He's had plenty of experience at playing the free safety, playing in the box, and playing slot corner. So I think the key term, obviously, when it came to Marcus May and Desmond King that I mentioned earlier for the cornerbacks, is versatility. That's my opinion that Washington can have, because when people go down, or you need that ability to play someone at different positions at a given time, or even when everybody's healthy and you're trying to give these defensive looks like a different disguise, Marcus May is a guy at safety who can do that for you as well. And that's where I think Washington should go, in my opinion. But I am not, like I said, I'm perfectly fine with re-signing Ronald, getting Xavier Rhodes. But my favorite combination of the two, if this was very well a possibility, would be Marcus May and Desmond King.
I mean, I think that would be a great combination. One thing we don't really talk about on this show that much, but Steve and I have talked about it a bit, and we did when we did IJB last week. The salary cap is, they're still trying to figure it out right now. I think the latest is they're saying 180.
They moved it up $5 million.
So that's going to mean
180 million.
Yeah, that's going to mean
that's
that
still significantly
about half
less than what it was last year, just for the
yes.
record.
So half these teams, they're not going to be able to afford their guys. Like the Vikings are way over the cap, I believe. So that means Anthony Harris has got a good chance of hitting the free agent market, for example. The Jets are in a great cap situation. Colts are in a great cap situation. I don't remember where the Broncos are, but you got to remember to think about that stuff too when you're starting to think about some of these names as fans. Is just keep taking a look at where teams are on that.
But also
cap
remember
list.
For Washington that Brandon Scherff is going to eat up a lot of Washington's cap space. They just can't. I think Jamal is right. I just don't think they're going to be in on Justin Simmons.
They can maybe afford one big name outside.
I don't know if they can even do that. I mean, it just depends on how much Scherff costs. They can afford some mid-price guys. I don't know if they can afford a big-name guy like Simmons in particular.
Yeah.
Marcus May, I don't think his market is going to be as big as Simmons, so sure, maybe. I think Washington...
But he might want to stay on the Jets because they'll have a ton of money.
I mean, who would want to stay on the Jets? But I think Washington historically drafts a lot of secondary players, so I think we're definitely going to see that. Which also, by the way, we need to cover your draft preview before we get out of here, Alex.
Yeah, why don't we, unless there's any other thoughts on this, I was going to say, why don't we pop in, quickly talk about my little draft preview column that I did about defensive ends.
So let me introduce it since you're going to do the piece. We are slowly working our way through our draft preview series, as we always do every year. Last week we covered, I can't even remember what we covered last week. I can't remember. But this week we're doing defensive ends. It will have something every week for you guys on draft previews. We're sort of working our way from least interesting to most interesting. And this year, since we obviously have Montez Sweat and Chase Young, this becomes one of the lesser interesting position groups. But Alex is going to cover some possibilities maybe that Washington might draft.
Right. So, like Steve said, not going to be a high priority position for us in the draft. If the team does draft a defensive end, I basically am assuming it's going to be day 3. You're talking, hey, maybe a guy fell, or we see this as a good special teams player. So with that in mind, I did put I pulled it from Ultra Football, just their top 20 list of all the big names who will be available. But then I kind of looked at guys who were projected to go rounds 5 through 7, watched some tape, and I came up with a handful of names that I thought were impressive, could be decent contributors. And let me just say this. Everyone seems to want pass rushers at defensive end. We don't need that in terms of support. What Washington really needs is a guy who can set the edge and be a sub on the power short yardage running.
You actually can have
that's
too
not
many
what,
pass rushers, people. It is possible.
Yes, you can. And you need to have a mix of pass rushers and run stuffers. So I was really looking at run stuffers more than anything. And so let me give you a couple names of guys who I looked at. They're all projected to go, like I said, later. The highest ranked guy from that list was Janarius Robinson from Florida State. He's kind of seen as he could go as far up as the 3rd round. I really liked what I saw when I was watching his highlights and stuff like that, though. One, he's a big. I think he'd bring some value on special teams. I think he had multiple blocked kicks on special teams, which guys go their whole career without blocking kicks. So, I love special teams guys. So you got to get. Yeah, I know. But he's good run stuffer. He's very good at pushing his guy back, getting off the tackle, and then just getting to the running back. That's kind of what he does well. Not a sack guy. 8 sacks in 4 years. So you're not going to expect that from him. And, that's probably pretty common about a lot of these guys. Like I said, though, he's probably going to go too high. We really don't need to get a guy that high. Another guy who I was looking at was Chauncey Goldston out of Iowa, who probably will go lower because he's not as fast and not as athletic, but similar aspects to his playing style, where he is very good at kind of bull rushing a tackle, pushing him into the backfield to get to the running back. Not to get to the quarterback necessarily, but if the run's coming his way, he seems to have that natural instinct to know to get off his guy and go after the ball carrier. Similarly, not a lot of sacks, 12 sacks in his whole college career. So you can do the math pretty quickly on these guys are not sack guys. Some other names I looked at, Haynes out of North Dakota, Notre Dame. He's a bit bigger. I think he's 270. So physically probably a more imposing defensive end. Might be more of a 3-4 guy than a 4-3 guy, but he's kind of in between with that size in my mind. Then there was Victor, I'm going to butcher his name, Dimujke from Duke, who was probably the most athletic of these late round guys that I was able to find. He probably would be more of your pass rusher type. Again, a guy who, because he has that ability to rush the passer, could go higher. I think we won't have the combine this year, but I think if he had a good pro day, he could get, 2nd round, 3rd round, that high up. Last guy, Oh, yeah, I've seen other places that have said that they think he's going that high. But, Duke has been putting out some good players, if you haven't noticed. Not elite NFL players, but, your mid-range. I mean, we got a couple on this team at this point. So, guys who can be good depth, they're putting those out now at Duke. And, they're usually not known for good football players. The last guy I'll mention, just because he's played at Ohio State, so he knows Chase Young and plays very similar to Chase Young, would be Jonathan Cooper. Kind of a poor man's Chase Young. Doesn't have the athletic talent, but that same kind of awareness that we see from Young. If you go and watch his tape, you see a lot of that there too. Just that knowledge to get your hands up when you need to get your hands up, to adjust what you're doing. If you're rushing, go into maybe dropping back because it looks like a screen. That those little awareness things. He's got that ability. So like I said, if Washington drafts a guy, and they probably won't draft a defensive end, but they might. Ron Rivera is a defensive guy. We talked about this the other show, or last show. he almost always drafts somebody on the D line every year.
I mean,
so like they might take somebody late.
Yeah, I hope they don't waste. First of all, I think Robinson's going to be gone way too high. But I hope Washington doesn't waste a draft pick on defensive end. They really don't need anybody this year. It's not the end of the world, if they, throw a late round pick at somebody, that's fine. But I definitely don't think they need to do that. I think there's many other needs other than defensive line. I think you're on the right track generally. I haven't watched a lot of these guys that you're mentioning here, but I think you're on the right track with run stuffer. That's clearly, if there's a need, that's what it is. But look, Washington has a ton of assets here, so I just don't think it's very likely they're going to do this. But if you're going to pick somebody, it's got to be like a Hayes type, big dude, run stuffer. That's what they need. So if I was going to do it, which I wouldn't, but if I was, I would go for one of these clear run stuffer types, like one of these guys you've mentioned.
Yeah. That's my bias too. I think if you're saying where they need help on the line, they need guys who can do that. Because right now, that's probably where they're thinnest is that skill set.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's defensive ends in the draft, and we probably won't take any of them.
Probably not.
So that's fine.
Maybe Washington will re-sign
That's why I also
Junior
wasn't
Galette.
too worried about this list.
He's been babbling endlessly for years about how the NFL's screwing him. Maybe Washington will bring him back. Let's hope not.
Right. Yeah. He's been getting extra crazy lately.
Yeah,
and I was a fan of his. But...
He ain't all the way there. He's becoming full conspiracy mode. So
I must have missed something then. Now that I'm off Twitter, I must have missed his latest rants, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
He keeps talking about 2017 and what coaches told him and how he was Pro Football Focus's best player they ever seen, stuff like that. So he got it out for a lot of people.
Dude, it's been 5 years or whatever. Like, you're starting to get a little Uncle Rico with the but way back when thing.
Did you say Uncle Grinko?
Uncle Rico.
Oh, Uncle Rico. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah, no, I just thought you said
Grinko.
Grinko. I thought, okay, I don't know
what
that is.
Rico.
Uncle Rico,
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think I can throw the ball over them mountains there?
So, yeah, it's a done deal for that, man.
Yeah. Well, he's also, at this point, he's of the age where it's not realistic for him to come back.
At some point, you've been out of the NFL too long.
Right. Anyway, that should do it for my draft column. Is there anything else we want to talk about, or we want to wrap this thing up, guys?
No, it's been a quiet week.
It really has.
Yeah, it's been a very quiet week. We'll hope and pray that there's drama. Let's hope for drama and chaos next week.
So let's do this moving forward until we get a definitive answer. All right. After each show, we're going to have a prediction or projection of one quarterback who we think is going to be week one starter. So after the end of every show, we'll just say one quarterback's name. It can change from on a weekly basis, but we'll just go ahead until we find a definitive answer. And
are we saying most likely right now? Is that the plan?
Most likely, yep.
Okay.
It can be a free agent, a trade target, or a current roster member. So we're just gonna end it after every show. We'll do it like that until we have an answer.
I like this.
Okay.
I like this, Jamal.
See?
That's a good idea.
Okay.
My brain works a little bit.
Yeah, we'll keep this up. We'll keep this up at least until we have something more interesting to talk about. I'll go first. Alex Smith.
Okay.
Alex Smith is going to start.
You think Alex Smith next year? Okay.
Alex?
Yep.
I am going to go with Mr. Heineke for now. I think that, that would be my best guess.
All right. So, I got to start this off with a bang, man. It's not going to be It's not going to be fair, but I'm gonna start off with a bang. Jameis Winston is going to be a starting.
Oh my God, I'm shocked.
starting quarterback for Washington. For obvious reasons. I'm gonna just leave it at that. No explanation. Jameis Winston.
Crab leg vendors, lock your doors.
Absolutely, I'll help him.
Oh, I know a good crab place he could go.
Exactly, I'll guide him to the best places in the area. Trust me. See you soon, Jameis.
Yeah, Jamal, we can talk later. There's a crab chain that I've just discovered recently, that's in PG County that I'm loving.
You know what?
So
please. My girlfriend loves crab, so we can make that a trip.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Later, guys. We will talk to y'all next week.
Peace.
Bye.